All right, everybody. Welcome back to another live chat. We're having some connectivity issues at the moment, so we're going to try to work through that. I'm going to wait for Stormy to jump on and hope that the video doesn't freeze. Let's see. I sent you the invite. Let's see.
Hello.
All right. I think we're okay. So, for everybody that's joining us tonight, I had a couple things. Yesterday, I had an issue with work. I worked 13-hour day. It was extremely stressful. So I couldn't get on to do our insomnia chat. I was just exhausted. I could barely keep my eyes open. So we are postponing that till next Tuesday, but we are going to do it. Thank you. Thank you. I usually wear a hat, but I was rushing a little bit today because the internet's messed up. But yeah, so next Tuesday we're gonna do our insomnia with Sierra Slate. She's gonna join on and talk to us about general anxiety disorder and her insomnia and stuff like that. And I'll give the borderline aspect and then just insomnia in general. So we'll go with that. So when we were doing the video last week, what was happening was that something's going on with TikTok where when we record the videos and I have someone join on the live right now, like Stormy, the videos are freezing when I go to do the playbacks. It's weird because if I watch the replay on the screen, I don't have that problem, but when I go to do the playback itself, something's wrong. So we're trying to get to the bottom of that so I can repost some of the videos that aren't up on YouTube, and there's one that's like frozen. So we're gonna fix that. Also, last week, I was told when I was doing the Easter eggs for the last chapter that the video cut out. So I'm going to finish doing those Easter eggs real quick, just so we have it on the video, and then we're going to dive into the book. We're going to have Steve joining us again, doing his role of Betty, the old Twain, and Stormy is going to be playing Stacy and then Stella. So to get us kicked off with chapter 6 from last week, the Easter eggs that we missed talking about, because it said that it cut out after I talked about the third base pup. So the other things to talk about is that on page 136, Gwen is sitting there and she's talking about Stacy's drinking and how it's like a turn on to her and stuff. And then also on 140, she's talking about how, she's scared but also turned on by the chaos that Stacy brings. And she's saying that when she's in the car she could see like the smoke and stuff like that illuminating around her as they're driving through under the street lamps and stuff. That was actually inspired by something from my own life. It was actually how I started to fall for my child's mother back in the day. It was that chaos mixed with the crazy and the adventure and everything else, literally like in that exact scenario is how that whole thing started. The last part of the Easter eggs that got cut off was that the three main characters that are in the book is Stacy, Gwen, and Stella. Now, each one of them is a different side of like my borderline and how I lived and stuff like that. Like their personalities mock different aspects. So Stacy's more of like my chaotic BPD, like the kind of like throws and like, the wild side of it. Whereas to Gwen is like the normal back and forth of like the swings, going from like the self-doubt to one extreme to the next, and Stella's like the regular even keel that I usually keep it at. So that's how you'll see throughout the book how they act and stuff like that is like how the different things happen. So those are just the Easter eggs that we missed from last week when the video cut off. So today we're going to jump into chapter 7, and it's called The Great Escape. So it kind of gives a little teaser as to what's going to happen in it. Just give me 1 second. Like I said, we were having a little bit of technical difficulties. What page are you on?
153.
153. All right. All right, here we go. Stormy, you ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. Chapter 7, The Great Escape. I was sleeping so soundly, wrapped up in Stacy's arms, that I didn't realize just how long we had been sleeping. The doorbell at the front of her house had been ringing like someone was outside with an emergency. I looked up at Stacy as she sat up from the bed.
Who the fuck is ringing the doorbell this early?
I don't know, but you better go see who it is. Stacy got up from the bed and threw on a sweatshirt over her pajamas and headed downstairs. I remained laying in Stacy's bed, curled up into the pillow she was lying her head on and taking in the sweet smells of the scent she left on her sheets. I could hear Stacy talking with someone downstairs, but I couldn't make out who it was with. The curiosity got the best of me as I got up from the bed and looked out her window. I could see a blue car parked in the street, but no one was in it. I slightly opened the window and I could hear Stacy arguing with Betty outside the front door. I looked to the driveway and saw Stacy's mom's car was gone, so I headed downstairs to see what was going on. As I got to the bottom of the stairs, in plain view of Betty, she spoke.
There you are, Gwen. I need to talk to you.
I just told you, Betty, we don't want any part of this shit.
Hang on, Stacy. I want to hear what she has to say. I walked over to the front door and I could tell Betty was worried about something. She had such an overwhelming look of dread printed all over her, and it almost seemed like she was holding back tears. What's going on, Betty?
I'm sorry. It's Stella's primary doctor.
No.
I'm sorry.
We're
Sorry.
good.
Gwen, I'm so glad I found you. I just got a call today from Dr. Drew with some terrible news.
Who's that?
I'm sorry, it's Stella's primary doctor. He told me today that he wants to ship Stella off to some clinic hours away, saying that it will be good for her. I don't trust him anymore, especially after what we discovered yesterday. I need to get Stella out of that prison, and I really need your help.
What is Gwen going to do? Gwen, don't get involved in this.
But I want to help her. The poor girl deserves a shot at life, and not to be locked up in there. What did you have in mind?
I can't believe I'm hearing this shit. I'm going upstairs, but you mark my words, this is a huge mistake.
Stacy stormed off upstairs, upset with me again, but I just felt this overwhelming feeling that I needed to help with the situation. You can call it intuition or whatever, but I know in my heart something was gravitating me to help her.
Listen, there is a way we can do this, but we have to act fast. I know one of the janitors at the ward who would help us, and all I would need to do is get us back into that ward, and I can distract the nurses while you sneak Stella out. You'll have to move fast, but it can be done. Please tell me that you'll help me.
I'll do what I can, Betty. Just can you give me a few minutes to get ready?
Yes, absolutely. But please do hurry, dear. Time is of the essence.
Sure, I'll get changed right now. I headed upstairs, and I could tell I was still a little drunk from the night before. It was an odd feeling coming off of a bender, but still feeling the remnants of yesterday's libations. My balance felt a little off, but I know I needed to get my shit together. When I got up off the top of the stairs and walked into Stacy's room, she was sitting on her desk beside the window and smoking a cigarette. She must have been listening to the whole conversation I just had with Betty, because the expression on her face was not a happy one. I walked over and grabbed the clothes that I was wearing yesterday and began dressing myself.
You seriously going to go with her? Gwen, don't do this. It's not safe, and it's not your problem.
I know it's not my problem, Stacy, but in my heart, I know it's the right thing to do. Please, just trust me on this.
I can't, Gwen. I simply can't. I'm not going to let you throw your life away and get arrested for breaking some whack job out of the nut house.
You need to just trust me, Stacy. I'll be fine. Betty seems to have a plan, and I don't think she would risk her own life if she wasn't sure.
You saw her. She doesn't seem like she's got all her marbles upstairs either. Please, just stay here with me.
I will be back, I promise. I walked up to Stacy and took the cigarette from her. I took a drag off of it, and as the smoke blew from my mouth, I could tell Stacy was genuinely worried about me, and it felt nice. It was nice to have that feeling of someone who actually cared for me. I leaned over and kissed her on the forehead and threw the cigarette out the window. I continued getting ready as Stacy watched me from her desk. Once I was fully dressed, I grabbed a few swigs from the bottle to get myself right, and then started for the door. As soon as my hand touched that door, Stacy got up from her desk and wrapped her arms around me. She felt like she just didn't want to let me go, and every inch of my being didn't want her to either. I turned around looking at her in the eyes and said, "Everything's going to be fine. You gotta trust me."
I lost you once, and I don't want to go through that again.
"You're not going to lose me. I'm going to be back later tonight." Stacy had a little tear swelling up in her eye, so I took my hand and wiped it away. She let out a sort of nervous chuckle and walked over to her desk. She opened up the drawer and rustled through a few things, and when she found what she was looking for, she turned around and said,
Take this key. It will let you back in the front door. I would wait to make sure my mom's car isn't here, but I think we should rip the Band-Aid off and tell her about you being back anyway. I know she would be happy to see you, and it would be fine.
"All right, Stacy, we can discuss it later."
I have to go to work shortly, but I'll be back around 4.
Sounds good. Well, I hope you have a good day at the very least. I gave Stacy a big hug and a little kiss on the cheek. She smiled at me, and I turned around and headed out of her bedroom. As I walked down the stairs and out the front door, shutting it behind me, I saw Betty was sitting in the driver's seat, waiting for me with the engine running. I walked up to the car and got in. As I closed the car door behind me, Betty said,
I'm sorry to wake you so early, my dear. You didn't even have any breakfast yet, did you?
"That's okay, but if we have some time to kill, I wouldn't mind getting some."
Well, it's 9 in the morning now, and visitation starts in an hour. So we'll head down into town and grab some food there and be on our way.
Hey, it sounds perfect to me. Betty put the car into drive and headed towards downtown. Driving with her was vastly different than Stacy's crazy driving from last night, as Betty obeyed all the rules of the road and wasn't any sort of a rush. I did still have a great time last night, regardless of the way it ended. There was just something about Stacy that made me feel so secure. It's still so weird to think that my childhood best friend could be a romantic interest for me. If you would have asked me this 7 years ago, there'd be no way I could ever see that playing out. I just had these intuitions, and in reality, I had nothing to lose, so why wouldn't I act on them? My mom always said that these were signs of God showing us the way when we stray off of course. I actually started to believe that, because everything I've done so far in the last few days led me back home to Stacy, and I was starting to remember what happiness felt like again. It wasn't a happiness temporarily created by substance abuse. This feeling was the true definition of it. I finally felt like I belonged somewhere, and I wasn't worrying about survival anymore. I was just living in the moment and focusing on my happiness. Maybe all the things in life I said were possible, like falling in love and having a place to call home, maybe they could be possible. Thinking about my new future in mind, I began to crack a little smile. Betty, who had been peering over at me as she drove, noticed it and asked,
You have feelings for that girl, don't you?
"Who? You mean Stacy?" "No, we're just friends."
You know, I was young once, right, dear? The little smile you have on your face there, that's how it all starts.
"We've been best friends our whole lives. She's like family to me."
Well, she can be family to you or family with you. The heart knows exactly what it wants, and no matter how much you tell yourself otherwise, love will always conquer.
"Wow, Betty. I didn't take you for such a romantic."
Once upon a time, my dear. Now I give all my love to these girls in need. It's what Vanessa would have wanted.
Vanessa was your daughter, right?
Yes, and always will be. I miss her each and every day.
I'm so sorry, Betty. I heard what happened.
It's sad, but I know that she is with her father and God, and that she is much happier now. It won't be much longer till I see her face again.
Why do you say that?
Well, I'm not getting any younger, my dear, and I know when God is ready, He'll come for me. In the meantime, I use my time to help these girls out and make sure that they are loved and cared for.
That's why you have such an interest in Stella, right?
That is one of the reasons. Stella is such a sweet and loving girl who got dealt such a bad hand in life. She reminds me in a lot of ways of my Vanessa. They are different, but sometimes the things Stella would do or do mimic moments from my own life, watching Vanessa do them too. Stella only wanted someone to love her and be there for her. It's unfortunate that her father ran to the bottle when his daughter was right there looking for his affection. I do understand in a way having lost a child myself, but there are other ways to channel that pain and make something positive of it.
I feel for her deeply. I've had a lot of my own troubles in life, too.
I can sense it, dear. I work around enough girls with tough lives to notice it on you. Knowing your background and a little bit as well, I can only imagine what you must have gone through. I am here if you would like to talk about any of it.
I appreciate that. Maybe someday I'll take you up on it. For now, I think I'm just going to do my best to focus on the life in the now. It feels really good to be back home, and I just feel so happy right now.
The day you realize that home is a person and not a place is when you can truly find happiness. It's when you realize that no matter where you go in life physically, you will always be home with that one special person beside you. Trust me, dear, I know all too well.
As those beautiful and encouraging words just bestowed on me really etched into my heart, she was absolutely right, and it made my feelings towards what I was experiencing with Stacy gain validation. Before I could think on it too deeply, we pulled up to the general store, and Betty parked the car. As we exited the car and walked inside, Pete was working behind the counter and was humming a song and playing on the radio in what seemed to be Italian. He noticed us come right in as he sang out, "Buongiorno, signore!"
Good morning, Peter. How are things today?
Yeah, it's a grind, but things are looking up. The sun is shining. That's all we could hope for, right?
Yes, that's very true. Can we get a couple sandwiches for the road?
No problem. You want your usual breakfast sandwich?
Yes, that would be perfect.
What can I get for you, Miss Gwen? I'll have the same thing as Betty. Perfetto! Coming right up. Pete headed into the back and began making sandwiches. Betty walked over to the station where they had some coffee machines and poured herself some. I really wanted to get a couple of drinks while I was in town, but I didn't know if it would be appropriate to ask Betty to take me there. I started to realize it probably wouldn't be a good idea to go through with this whole plan while feeling the symptoms of withdrawal. The chaotic combination of anxiety and alcohol withdrawal wouldn't make the situation any easier. I just needed to come up with a way to bring that up to Betty. I walked over to the coolers, grabbed myself an orange soda, and walked back to the counter. Betty stood waiting at the front with her coffee in hand, reading a newspaper Pete had laying on the counter. She slowly sipped her coffee, and like word diarrhea, I spewed out, hey, Betty, do you think it's possible that we stop at another store on the way?
Sure, that's no problem. Where did you need to go?
Well, I wanted to do something nice for Stacy today, and I know she likes this drink, so I wanted to stop and get it. You know, it's at the liquor store down the road.
It's a little early in the morning for that, is it not?
I think it should be open by now. I just want to surprise her, and if I have to rely on her taking me there, then it won't be a surprise.
I understand. Yes, we can stop by on our way out of here.
Okay, ladies, food is all set. I reached into my pocket where I had some money, but Betty signaled for me not to worry about it. She handed Pete a $20 bill from her purse. Pete went to give her a change, but she insisted he keep it as a tip. Pete nodded and dumped the remaining money into the jar by the register that said tips on it in big letter. Betty handed me the sandwich. We walked over to one of the tables, and she added some salt to her sandwich.
I know the salt isn't good for me, but I've always liked it since I was a little girl.
Hey, I'm not judging. I'm the same way with ketchup. I put my sandwich down and lifted the bun as I loaded my breakfast sandwich with ketchup. Betty looked at me in amazement while shaking her head and spoke.
Yeah, I guess you weren't kidding, huh?
We both chuckled a little bit and rewrapped our sandwiches and took some napkins for the food. As we went to exit the store, we waved goodbye to Pete and headed for the car. When we got into the car, Betty quickly took a few bites of her sandwich, and you could just see the satisfaction on her face.
Pete sure does make a great sandwich.
I remember as a kid his father did too. I haven't tried one of Pete's yet, but Stacy seems to really like him.
Well, don't let me hold you up, dear. Feel free to dig in. I just wanted to get a few bites in while it's hot before we stop by that store for you.
If it's not too out of the way. I mean, if it is, I could always figure something out later.
Nonsense, dear. It's the least I can do for all the help you are giving me. We'll stop by the Drunken Monk if that's okay.
I instantly got a little worried about going there since I robbed that place yesterday and was not looking to get in trouble for that. How could I argue with Betty because realistically, that was the closest liquor store on the path we were going. I nodded my head in agreement and Betty placed her sandwich down in her lap and started the car. It was only a minute drive to the liquor store, so I quickly opened my sandwich and began to eat it. The food was just as amazing as Betty described it, and it even made Ryan's sandwiches seem inferior. I guess that old adage of fine Italian dining was true after all. As Betty pulled up to the liquor store, she asked,
What is it that you wanted to get your friend, dear?
I can go in and get it. It's not a big deal.
That's okay. You enjoy your food and I'll take care of it.
Okay, well, it's a bottle of vodka with like a Russian-sounding name, and it's got like a little bear on it, and it's like holding a bottle in front of it.
That shouldn't be too hard to find. I'll be right back.
Do you want me to give you some money?
No, that's not necessary. I'll take care of it.
Well, thank you, Betty. Betty nodded her head and shut the car door behind me. I kept eating my food as I watched Betty walk into the liquor store. It gave me relief that she was willing to do that rather than me run into the possibility of getting in trouble. As I finished my sandwich, I crumpled up the foil wrapper, balled it into my pocket. It was only about 5 minutes before Betty came walking out with a brown bag. When she got into the car, she handed me the bag and asked,
Is this the right brand, dear?
When I looked in the bag, I saw the same jug of vodka as I stole yesterday, and along with it, a flask-sized bottle as well. I was confused as to why she got me the extra bottle, but before I could even ask her, she said,
My husband was a drinker too, dear. It's nothing to be ashamed of as long as you know the consequences and you can handle it. It is my professional job to remind you that you're doing to your body, but you are a grown woman who will make your own choices in life.
How did you know?
I could tell when I had picked you up that you smell like a brewery, and also your hands were shaking on your lap. So, either you had a rough night, or this is an ongoing thing. Either way, I'm not judging you, but I need you to be sharp for what we're about to do. Please help yourself to a little drink before we go in if it'll help you.
I almost feel ashamed right now to be drinking in front of you.
It's okay, dear. My husband was famous for doing so. He used to call his breakfast drink the hair of the dog. He wasn't abusing it or anything, but in his family, it was just something they did. When you truly love someone the way I love mine, Michael, then you accept them for who they are.
Betty had such a way of being comforting, and I now realized that she was probably successful at being a school nurse. I could see why Stella was so comfortable enough back then to befriend her. She had this matronly sense about her, but at the same time, she felt like a close and understanding friend. I suddenly stopped worrying about having a drink in front of her, so I reached into the bag and I took a few good swigs from the flask-sized bottle she got me. When I was finished, I screwed the cap back on and used the orange soda that I picked up to chase it down. Seeing that I was all finished, Betty spoke.
All set to go?
I nodded my head in agreement, and she turned on the car and backed out of the liquor store. We were finally on our adventure to go see Stella. My heart began pounding out of my chest the closer we got to the hospital. I was always a textbook overthinker, and I knew I needed to relax, so I politely asked Betty, "Hey, Betty, my nerves are a little shot. Would you mind if I turned on the radio for a little bit?"
Not at all, dear.
Betty turned the knob on the radio, and the music clicked on.
Feel free to put on whatever you like.
Thanks, Betty.
Not a problem at all. Listen, I have a strange question for you. Did you happen to save your sandwich wrapper from before?
Yeah, actually, it's in my pocket. I didn't want to just throw it on the floor of your car, and I figured I could always throw it out at the hospital.
That's great, but instead of doing that, let me take it from you. It's going to come in handy when we get inside.
How's that?
There's one girl named Tammy that is in the ward who has a deathly fear of aluminum foil. My plan is to create a diversion. We can use that sandwich wrapper to throw her in a state so the nurses at the station focus on that direction. While they're distracted, Carl, the janitor I spoke of earlier, will be transporting cleaning supplies through the doors and you can sneak Stella out. You girls head down the road a little bit, and when the dust settles, I will pick you up. Things will get a little hectic at first, but we can find a way for Stella to lament and evaluate her further away from that place.
Where's she going to stay?
Well, dear, that's the part I haven't come up with yet. Once I heard the news of her transfer, I knew I had to act quickly. I would have simply stayed with me, but that would be the first place they will look for. Once the smoke settles, then I can find a place for her. Do you know anywhere she might be able to stay?
I have a few ideas, but I can't promise anything. What if we just stay in a hotel? I can rent a room under one of my aliases.
You have aliases?
My life before coming home wasn't always the greatest, so I do have some fake ID cards should I get into a pinch.
I know it's not my business, so I won't ask you. However, I can see you are prepared for a storm. I am glad God has had us cross paths.
I agree, Betty. You truly, really are a very kind person, and I'm glad we got reacquainted.
Well, thank you, dear. That truly means a lot.
So, should I just walk in with you like the last time I did when we visited?
Yes, but if you have one of your IDs, then you should sign in under that.
It's funny you should ask, but I actually do have one on me. I pulled out one of my alternate ID cards and showed it to Betty. The ID was made several years ago by some guy in Stinson that I met at a bar, and he had got me out of a few jams with it. The name on the license was Penelope Evers. I was listed as 8 years older than my actual age, so it made buying alcohol pretty easy. The name was something to be desired, but I had just gotten used to not having a real identity anyway while living on the road. Betty chuckled as she read the ID and spoke.
You don't take me for Penelope, my dear, but I guess this should work.
Yeah, I didn't get to pick the name. I would have picked something more common like Maria or Claire. As you said yesterday, my real name isn't that common either, so I guess it's fitting.
Yes, that's very true. Okay, dear, we're finally here. Let me take that foil from you, and we will get this show on the road. Are you ready?
I mean, I guess so. Let me take another drink real quick. I reached down and grabbed the flask-sized bottle again and took a few gulps from it. As I went to put it away, Betty took it from my hand and drank a little bit herself. No sooner than she swallowed it did she start coughing like it was almost like the first time she'd ever tried it. I took the bottle back from her and screwed on the cap. Almost spitting my vodka out from the laughter, I swallowed it hard and used my chaser to ease the taste.
I don't know how you drink that sort of thing.
Honestly, I'm surprised you did that. Why did you drink it?
Well, because I am nervous too, so I thought maybe it would help. Okay, let's get going.
Betty, still coughing from the rough-tasting vodka, climbed out of the car and shut the door. As I got out of the car, I saw her spitting some of the residue vodka on the ground. As I walked over to her, she began leading me into the hospital. As we pushed open the doors, we were greeted by the receptionist Stacy was talking to yesterday when she checked in. Betty told her that she was going to see Stella and signaled for me to follow her. We followed the same path we did yesterday and headed into the ward. When we got inside, it looked exactly the same as the day before, with a few girls watching TV, except this time I saw Stella sitting over where we sat yesterday. She was looking out the window and seemed really peaceful. Betty was signing in on the clipboard, and when she was finished, she handed me it. I began writing out my alternate name on the sheet, and as I was writing, Betty whispered to me,
Over by the bathroom, there's a little thing down the hall is Carl. When he sees me, he is going to start making his way towards the exit. When I see him round in the nurse's station, I will give Tammy the aluminum ball, and then you'll have your moment to get her out. Don't be nervous. You'll do just fine.
Betty took the clipboard from my hand and returned it to the nurse's station. She started to walk over to this frizzy-haired girl sitting on the couch, staring at the TV. I began walking over to Stella, and as I approached the table, I said, "Good morning, Stella. You mind if I sit with you?"
I guess so.
I sat down across from her, and she didn't even look over at me as she continued to be focusing on something off into the distance. I tried to think of how I was going to be able to get this girl, who was a complete stranger to me, to follow me out of a place that she only knows is home. I started to really doubt this entire plan. Just thinking off my feet, I took a leap and said, "Do you remember me from yesterday?"
Yeah.
Well, Stella, remember I told you that you had a life outside of here?
What about it?
Well, I could show it to you. I could show you all the things that you had forgotten.
How?
Well, in a second, Betty's going to create a distraction, and then I'm going to take you home.
What are you talking about?
I really don't have time to explain, but if you want to know the truth about your life before this, you need to trust me. You need to follow me, and I promise you, I will take you to your real home. Stella turned and looked with her ocean blue eyes, and I gave her a serious stare in return so she would realize that I was serious. We had our eyes focused on each other like little kids in a staring contest. When out of the corner of my eye, I could see the janitor approaching the nurse's station. I placed my hands on top of Stella's, which were lying flat on the tabletop, and spoke. "Just trust me, Stella. I can answer all the questions you have if you just trust me." Stella's glare softened, and she nodded her head in acceptance. As the janitor walked across the desk, the girl with the frizzy hair let out a terrible scream, which didn't even seem to grab Stella's attention. The nurses behind the station ran over to see what was going on as they huddled around this panic-stricken girl. "Okay, Stella, let's go. Follow me." We stood up from the table, and I held Stella's hand, guiding her towards the exit that the janitor had just opened. We quickly stayed even pace with the janitor and made our way to the exit. The screams from the frizzy-haired girl got softer and softer as the double doors we passed through closed behind us. The janitor signaled for us to wait a second as he walked up to the main receptionist's desk and began talking to the girl working. After a few moments of conversation, he signaled with us to make a move under the looking glass with his hand. So I took Stella and pulled her tight behind me. As stealthily as I possibly could, we went through the doors and headed out into the parking lot. Boom. And that's chapter 7. I'm going to give a big hand to Steve and Stormy.
Hey.
Great job reprising those roles. Okay, so now we have for chapter 7, we have our Easter eggs. There's not very many in this one. It was more just like to kind of drive it home and like bring Stella back into the picture and get her out and all that. So with chapter 7, The Great Escape, the one Easter egg that's in it is, and I think I've talked about this earlier in the book when Gwen was at Ryan's Deli back in Stinson, but the way Gwen is with ketchup and stuff like that, it was a nod to my daughter because literally everything that this kid eats, she drowns it in an ocean's worth of ketchup. And it's just like, no matter how much you put on her plate to start with, it's never enough. So that was just a nod to her yet again in the book. There's a lot, you'll see throughout the book, there's a lot of nods to her or things that we've done and stuff. So just something to look forward to. And then the last Easter egg that's in it is Tammy is actually based off of somebody I knew. I used to party down in a town called Lyndhurst. It's actually where I met my kid's mom and a bunch of friends, and it was a big part of like my early adulthood. There was a girl down there that we used to hang out with. Her name was actually Mandy, and she was deathly afraid of aluminum. And I was kind of like when the one guy I was hanging out with, Gil, told me that, I was like, aluminum? Like, is that like a real thing? Like, people are afraid of that? And he said, watch. And he legitimately took a ball of aluminum foil. He's like, here, catch. And right when she saw it, she went into like a panic state and started freaking out. Like, it was like very like traumatizing to her to like see it or touch it or anything. So, you know, that's where that inspiration came from. Because when I was writing the book, I was like, what could they do in the mental health ward to like really like create a distraction? And then I was just thinking and thinking and thinking, and I was like, that's it. That's an easy like covert thing that they could sneak in and stuff like that that would create an adverse reaction to do that. Because again, I had witnessed that adverse reaction, and it was surprising me to see that actually happen. So next week, we don't have Betty in on that chapter, and Steve usually does his play practices on Thursdays. That's why we switched it to today. So when we have the Betty dialogue, we'll do it on Wednesdays to accommodate his schedule, and then when we don't, we'll go back to Thursdays. So next Thursday, we're going to be joining again to do chapter 8, which is called Welcome Home, Stella Morgan. So it'll be this time next week on Thursday. So with that being said, again, I apologize for those who joined late or anything like that about yesterday with the insomnia thing. I was really looking forward to doing it and stuff. It was just wild. This time of the year at the post office is absolutely like the worst thing in the world. So trying to work a 12 to 13 hour day, and then come have less than an hour to shower, prepare, eat, and then jump right on. It's a lot. So again, I apologize for that, but next Tuesday we will definitely do it, and that'll be all set. So for everybody that joined us tonight, I want to thank you guys. I had a great time reading it. It's great going through this book and giving life to the characters and stuff like that. And if it's your first time checking us out tonight, you can always jump on Amazon and buy the book for 99 cents and read along with us, or speed ahead, get caught up. You can always jump on our YouTube and watch all the videos as well, so that way you can get a background and get some life to the characters. We are going to be getting a few more characters coming in the next few chapters. We will see another familiar face coming up soon, Detective Hunt from the first book. Everyone's like hated enemy, but he will be coming up very soon. So, thank you all for each week joining in and stuff like that and spending this time with us. It's really cool to be able to give back and do this, and it really means a lot. So thank you so much for your support. I wanted to give you guys an update as well before I jumped off. I actually just finished, coincidentally, we read chapter 7 today. I actually just finished chapter 7 in the third book today. So I'll be jumping on to do story time with Stormy to get her input on it. A lot going on. It was a little hard to write that chapter. It's kind of sad. The beginning of this book has been so upbeat and whatnot, and then it kind of takes like a little bit of a turn, but it's, driven for the story. So I did say around Christmas time, so within the next 2 weeks or so, I'll give another teaser about book 3. I haven't figured out what exactly I'm going to do, because I don't want to spoil anything that's going on and what we're doing right now, but I promise that I will do something. So thank you guys again for joining us, and I will see you next week.